continent's largest crude oil producer has faced a number of challenges in the past several years when it comes to production and output. But there could be light at the end of the tunnel as Nigeria's oil export terminals are set to resume production to fulfill the futures contracts for the Forcados and Bonga streams. Forcados will load 263,000 barrels per day in July, up from 245,000 in June, while Bonga will load 123,000 barrels per day in July, down from 127,000 the month before. But as this news comes, so does news that the country's production of crude oil is considered low in official quarters. Minister of Finance Zainab Ahmed has said that Nigeria is barely able to cover the cost of imported petrol from its oil and gas revenue. In an interview at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Ahmed said she hoped Nigeria's oil production would average 1.6 million barrels per day by the end of the year, up from 1.5 million in the first quarter. The government had targeted 1.8 million barrels per day of production, but issues such as crude theft and attacks on oil infrastructure remain a challenge. Nigeria exports crude oil and imports refined petrol, suffering intermittent fuel shortages. The country is facing double-digit inflation, low growth, all of this coming amid a shrinking labor market and mounting insecurity. Today, we're discussing Nigeria's production output realities. This is Business Edge. I'm Tolulokwe Adileru Balogun. Joining me from Abuja, Nigeria is Desmond Agboifo. He's an energy expert and also the director of Decitone Energy. Desmond, welcome back to Business Edge once again. Welcome.
Thank you very much and good morning. And I hope you guys are all doing very well today.
I think we're doing great. All right, so let's look at how the country began the year. Unfortunately, a holdover from last year, Nigeria unable to meet its recommended OPEC production quota as far back as December 2021. And we know intermittently throughout last year as well, the country failed to meet that. And then, of course, the Russia-Ukraine conflict now also created more supply deficiencies. What do you think the past few months have been telling us about Nigeria's ability to produce and also meet up to its recommended production quotas?
Thank you very much, Tolu. I think the last 5-6 months has not been particularly impressive. Speaking around what the oil and gas industry in Nigeria has played, as we've seen a lot of dynamics around the space. But taking it down home, Nigeria has had a bit of a struggle, I must say. And of course, we also see the reasons why we have those struggles. So clearly, we've seen that the planned production for the country from the budget office was 1.8 million barrels per day. And of course, that wasn't achieved. I mean, that has also been opined by the Minister of Finance because from her report in her very recent conference, we've seen that we just struggled to have around 1.6, which is even lower than even what was expected. In fact, the first quarter of this year, we had just around 1.5 and 1.5-ish million barrels per day. So again, what this really means is that it affects all of our spending structure in the country, because obviously the oil and gas industry is one of the key players that drive economic value for the country. And on top of that, we've also seen demand fluctuations. We've seen how diesel price and the fuel price has been experiencing some hikes in and out, partly based on the issues with our Asian refineries, and also seeing on a global scale, while the Russian and Ukraine issue has also impacted and also increased oil prices. Just yesterday, I was having a session with the permanent secretary just about the issues that we see in the country, and he even clearly said that one of the goals of this administration was to ensure that we have stable and sustainable production across all of our assets. But that hasn't panned out well, because we've seen that there's a couple of issues that we need to manage with. But all in all, I can say the first quarter wasn't too bad, but it can be better.
All right, so we know one of the issues that will, in the next few months and next several years, be a bigger problem for Nigeria is about the issue of production output setbacks and, of course, the divestments. We've seen multinational oil companies leaving the country. We've seen Shell, Total, Exxon as well. These are big players who are in the process of selling off their assets as well as their stakes in Nigerian production. What's chasing these oil majors out of Nigeria?
Right. I think setting the scene very clearly for a decision that comes from the oil majors, which is maybe like Total and Shell, to be able to divest to other interests, even comes with a bit of a shock on the national scene, because these companies has been with us when we began production. They have been longer with us. In fact, case in point, Total as a company has got several hundred assets and fields that they manage on behalf of operators and even joint venture assets. Now, having to see them pull out from the space doesn't spell too well as a country, because as a speech right now, we are even doing even less than 60% of our plant capacity, and the measures put together does about 45% of our national production output. So when that is taken out of the equation, we can see that that's a bit of a bite in our sustainable revenues. And personally, I've had a chance to talk to some of the sitting ministers, and of course, it's an issue even trying to drive their own budgets and the plans. But this can really be solved by really trying to, as you said, increase our sustainable capacity and create a lot of improvements around our assets. His Excellency Timothy Siva has stated clearly when he began office that we can do even up to 2.5 million barrels, 3 million barrels a day. In fact, that's part of his mandate while he's trying to drive the Ministry of Petroleum. But what we see now is even less than 50% of that. But recently, the report had that we had just about 1.5 million barrels, 1.6 million barrels pure crude, pure production, not even considering the condensing side of the equation. So yes, there's a lot of concerns on that, and it's coming at a time where we're trying to drive our investments, trying to sign up on PIA. The talks I had with the Palm Secretary also focus on plans to sort of ratify and drive the implementation of the PIA. Team have been set up already, so there's progress around the space to ensure that we get ourselves on track. The goal, yes, about 4 million barrels plan, reserves, about 40 billion barrels in reserves. These are huge targets for the country to do at the time where we're trying to transit into, of course, the much discussed accelerated energy transition. So yes, we'll put our hands on deck, but I'm certain that the PIA, when implemented fully, will be a game changer. And of course, we're still looking on how we can work with the Ministry of Petroleum to see how we can be able to provide those kind of value to ensure that we come right on track.
So we have to look at this in terms of a business case, because if I'm an investor and I have companies like Shell, ExxonMobil, Total Energies, as you said, they've been with us. Some have been with us 60 years. As old as the country is some of the business engagements we've had with some of these companies. If I see them leaving Nigeria with the amount of money they have to be able to put in for production or even investment, I would think twice about wanting to come to Nigeria to invest. So we have to stick with that. Where does Nigeria then look for, or rather look to now when it comes to investment into its gas and oil industry? Is there even still a business case for a major oil company either staying or seeking to invest in Nigeria? Because you mentioned, of course, the energy transition. So people are putting it that there's some sort of time limit for countries like Nigeria, which we'll discuss further, to actually really be able to use their crude resources or their natural resources as much as possible. So is there still a business case for an oil major the size of these companies to even look to Nigeria to invest?
Yes, absolutely. You're correct. Nigeria has always been an oil producing nation, and very recently we've seen that our gas reserves are also very impressive. In fact, we sit on around 201 trillion cubic feet of gas, and what that really means is that we are predominantly a gas province. I was speaking also to one of the panelists in the just concluded summit in Abuja. And he said, of course, we are currently in the age of gas, and the age of gas is even coming at the time where we're driving towards this energy transition. Gas is cleaner than oil. We all know all of those details. But yes, as a country, one of the business case, answer your question, is to focus more on gas. And we've seen that the PIA has sort of tempered the provisions on the gas assets a bit more favorable compared to the oil assets. So yes, the key message is that the business case is also very attractive for the IOCs and the other foreign investors coming to play in the Nigerian space, and it will also be of value for us to look in depth into what the gas would offer to the country, because I mean, except the likes of Qatar and Kuwait, who does pretty well, and of course Russia also, who is also having a lot of issues with sanction now. Nigeria also plays within the big leagues of gas producers. We've seen our Nigerian LNG also ramping up to 27. So yeah, there's a lot of discussions about the gas. So I think my thought would be focus on gas, because gas is cleaner, gas is more valuable, gas is cheaper, gas is the future of the country. Yes.
All right, Desmond, so hold the line there. Gas is the future of the country. Some might wonder if it's still worth it to get involved in Nigeria's crude oil, upstream, downstream oil and gas industry with some of the issues that the country has been facing. But beyond that, we know that the Russia-Ukraine crisis has also taken a hit on this sector. But before we get into that, when we come back, the conversation goes into how Nigeria can continue to afford the subsidy, as now the Minister of Finance is saying that it is just costing way too much. The conversation continues right after this. So with me is Desmond Agboifo, energy expert and the director of Desitone Energy, as we look at Nigeria's crude oil production realities. Now, the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative reports that more than 2 trillion naira has been lost to crude oil production deferment and points to factors such as breakdowns, trips, poor equipment performance, and sub-optimum operations as being responsible. The government's role is very clear, but there have been a lot of questions as to the role of the oil companies themselves in being complicit in some of the issues Nigeria is facing. So let me bring Desmond back into this. When you look at the state of Nigeria's oil and gas industry, we can see the government failings, but we can also see that there are partners. As you said, there are special vehicles involved, there are joint ventures, there are partners, there are percentages and all of that. What do we think about the role of the companies themselves in helping out the industry?
Right. To be very clear, the oil and gas industry is always an interplay, has been said in very public seminars, between the governments and the investors. So the investors here could be private investors, or it could be international investors. So to your question, what role they play a significant role. Of course, we see a lot of inclusion on the value they bring on the table, being technical partners or being operating partners. So when we face issues about such issues that we face in the country, it spells a bit of concern, because we've seen that for us to get to where we want to be as an industry, we need those players also. We need those technologies, and we need that sustainable partnership to be able to progress sustainably, as I say, which is the buzzword now in the industry. And so the foreign companies or investors have a key role to play, away from just driving the revenues that is required. They also bring in the value, the technology, and also help us to put up some international benchmark to ensure that we are doing what we ought to do. I like to borrow a narrative within what happens, comparing ourselves very deliberately within what happens in Nigeria and what happens in some part of the Middle East. We've seen that the value of bringing in the international partner has really been so good. In fact, they got it right from the first time. That's what has been said in various platforms. So that is also a model which we should be able to adopt fairly quickly. Nigeria began oil production way more and even earlier than most of these MENA countries. So we are in a position where we need to enhance our position with them, grow with them, and of course learn from them. Of course, the government has also done well, I must say, to ensure that we have various institutions that is set up to be able to help us to transcend or to transmit this type of expertise from the international spaces to the local space. Economically, it brings a lot of values. Just on an average, a deep water offshore project will cost anything around maybe $500, $600 million alone just for exploration programs. And of course, the whole capital spend is couples of billions, as we've seen in the Egina FPS. So Egina alone is operated by Total. And also see Egina as an asset operated by the IOCs brings about 10% of our national gross output in the country. These are assets that are managed by the international players, of course, in partnership with the government. So we cannot take them out of the equation. They are also essential, but having them to begin to pull back is something of concern, because I'm sure their balance sheets are not perhaps as strong as they want to be, and they're also sanctioned by the parent companies that they need to adhere to the accelerated energy transition in the world that we see today.
And that energy transition, we'll touch on it before we wrap things up. But let's also talk about another elephant in the room when it comes to conversations around crude oil and gas, and that has to do with the subsidy. Right now, we know that the minister who was speaking at the event in Davos said that it is now extremely difficult for Nigeria to keep up with the cost of importing petrol. So the cost right now is looking around 4 trillion and upwards for the country to import petroleum and subsidize it throughout the end of the year. And that's before we even added the Russia-Ukraine crisis to it. The question remains, how much longer can Nigeria continue to afford to subsidize petrol imports into the country?
Right, thank you. On the issue of the subsidy, I think it's quite a heated topic in the public discourse very recently. And I'm an advocate for the complete removal of the subsidy for many reasons. And one of which is, as a country, we bleed around 200 billion naira monthly just to keep the price at 165 naira in a liter. So when you put that all in all, we're spending so much. And if you compare countries like Libya, like Angola, that do similar production like Nigeria, we find out that they are doing pretty well. Subsidy alone, for me, it's sort of putting your money where you should have, built assets around it. So we can't get there bleeding that amount of money every month. I mean, you can see even from the discussion with the Minister of Finance at Davos that yes, we are currently in a fix as a country because we need to keep up with the subsidy requirements. And one of my recommendations would be, why is it always happening? Why can't we fix our Asian refineries? Because as a country, what is even clear that Nigeria exports crude oil and we import refined petrol. I mean, of course, that leads to making us to suffer intermittent fuel shortages. So why do we have to import the refined petrol and we export out the unrefined crude? So that's also a key issue that we need to address as a country and as a nation. We need to ensure that our refineries are up to speed. And thankfully, we've seen some of the private sector, like Dangote of the day, who is doing pretty well to ensure that that gap is abridged, but the government should do more. The subsidy issue needs to be taken out of the equation because the Nigerian nation needs sustainable revenues to run its nation.
All right, Desmond, as we're wrapping things up, there are about 6 regulations that are being planned after the passing of the Petroleum Industry Act, something around Nigerian upstream fee and rent regulations, also licensing round regulations, Nigeria royalty regulations, and even a host community commissions. All of this coming in the wake of the passing of the PIA. Then we, of course, know that the NNPC also will become a fully limited liability company who's meant to run like a private enterprise company, no more of this sort of civil service behavior that has been in play for a number of years. But you also see a number of global trends. A lot of people are saying this is pointing to Nigeria being on the right path. But then when you look at the low production, our inability to meet production targets, and even all of this coming at the time around this energy transition, the question is, does Nigeria risk having its oil and gas assets and resources being stranded because we haven't effectively taken advantage of these many years when the world was not moving away from fossil fuels, and the deadline is coming? There's a change. We can see that change in the global economy. Can we still have time? Does Nigeria still have time to take full advantage of its crude resources?
I'll say yes. There's always a silver lining. I think we have a bit of time, but the question of time would really bring the stakeholders to the room to be able to ensure that we put our ducks in a row and we drive a concerted strategy to be able to help us to achieve what we need to achieve. Timing, yes, wise, we do have some time. But however, I mean, with the pace of change at the global scene, it seems we don't have quite a lot of time. But I would think differently and say, with the time we have available and with the hands on deck, with a clear map strategy, we should be able to get our assets, optimally operated so that we can be able to get the value from this asset that we have. Because of course, as a nation, we depend a lot more on oil and gas, which is also very clear. But away from that, it also drives a lot of economic value for the country in terms of foreign exchange earnings and what have you. So taking that into the equation, we can also ensure that we put our best effort in place. We can work towards the best strategies to ensure that our assets are produced. We need to reduce the economic tension around the producing states having theft, vandalism, and all of those issues that befalls us as a country, because all of these things all piece together. You find out that when we don't hit our production targets, we have constraints in revenues. When we have constraints in revenues, we need to go out to borrow the same money that we have if we have done things right. So I think with the time we have, and of course trying to focus on the other side of the divide towards the energy transition, we need to get ourselves working as soon as we can and have a clear map to get to where we want to be.
All right, Desmond, thank you as always. I know we'll be touching base with you again sometime soon. Do have a good one.
Thank you very much.
All right. And a just energy transition was one of the main pieces of conversation at the African Development Bank's annual general meetings, which are intended in Ghana. If you want the details of that, you can look for them on our YouTube channel as well. And it'll be part of the reoccurring conversations that you'll hear throughout this year and into the future, as Africa, which is blessed with myriad number of natural resources, wants to continue to be able to use those resources for its economic and the development of its people, while the world is moving away from fossil fuels. Nigeria may just be a test case as to how long those natural resources can really be used. You're watching Business Edge. Up next is NC4 to watch. And now to a few stories we're keeping our eyes on. We start in the southern parts of the continent, where the South African rand has steadied against the dollar early on Tuesday ahead of the release of first quarter unemployment data and the latest trade balance figures. The rand traded at 15 rand 48 cents against the dollar, near its previous close of around 15 rand 47 cents. Kenya's national carrier, Kenya Airways, has announced that it will implement an exclusively cashless system effective from June 1st, 2022 at the Moi International Airport in Mombasa and the Kisumu International Airport. The Egypt Infrastructure and Utilities Subfund, affiliated to the Sovereign Fund of Egypt, is looking to inject 5 billion Egyptian pounds worth of investment into infrastructure projects across Egypt over the next 2 years. Karim Bard, the CEO of the subfund, said the fund is in the process of launching tenders for the construction of 5 desalination plants in partnership with the private sector, with a total capacity of 3 million cubic meters per day, with investments amounting to about $3 billion. And finally, Kenya's central bank unexpectedly raised its key interest rates for the first time in almost 7 years to anchor inflation expectations as concerns about commodity prices build. The Monetary Policy Committee increased the rates by 50 basis points to 7.5%. Head to our YouTube channel, download our mobile app, follow us on social media, and of course, watch us on the platforms we are available. This is Business Edge, wrapping things up for today, Tuesday. And of course, don't forget that at the top of the 12 o'clock hour, noon, right here in Nigeria, we're going to bring you News Central now, 12 p.m. West African time, for all the latest from here on the continent and beyond. I'm Tolu Lakwe Adeleru Balogun. Have a good one.